Hello, everyone. Welcome to our ACDA Western Virtual Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion series. Today, our session is This Land is Sacred, a land acknowledgement and Native perspectives in the choral arts presentation. We have three guests with us today who are going to be answering questions that are relevant and important to our work in the choral arts in 2022. I will be serving as moderator. My name is Dr. Alyssa Cossey. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I work at the University of Arizona.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Jace Kaholokula Saplan. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am currently on the lands of the Kanaka Maoli here on Oahu. I am the Director of Choral Activities at the University of Hawaii and Chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for ACDA Western. Michelle, would you like to go next?
Na Michelle Minania, na Kuyu Idakata, Gunga Meheji, Michelle Degum Dialei, Washishu Lei. Hi, my name is Michelle McCauley. I am coming to you from my own ancestral lands, the homelands of the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe, where my ancestors have always been. We fought our war, the Pyramid Lake War, to maintain our ancestral lands. I grew up here and I still live here. I currently have a master's degree in music education, and I used to be an elementary school teacher, a band director, and things like that. However, I've gone out on my own currently right now, and I do have a YouTube channel where I put out videos talking more about Native American music and all its capacities, and also how to be a more culturally competent educator. I myself, again, I spoke two languages, as is usually part of our customs: the Northern Paiute language, which we are trying to revitalized, and also the Washoe language, which is the language of my mother. I am not on the Washoe tribal homelands. However, that is part of my heritage. So now I will pass it on over to Megann.
Hi, my name is Megann Sala. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am currently also on the land of the Kanaka Maoli. I'm a master's student getting my degree in choral conducting at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. It's nice to meet you all.
And I'm joining you from Tucson, Arizona, and the Tohono O'odham and Pascua Yaqui tribes. We're going to start with one question and sort of general beginnings. What is a land acknowledgement? Why is it important? And what is the purpose of it in a choral setting? And this is to everyone.
I can go first. That's okay. A land acknowledgement to me is when a structural organization or an institution or an individual that could potentially be representing a structure or an institution humbles themselves to acknowledge the incredible and expansive history that connects to Native lands and Native stories by stating who the tribe is or who the folks are, by stating a little bit about the tribe and their mission in creating a more resilient and prosperous future, and the responsibility of kinship between the institution or the organization and that particular tribe. I think that this is incredibly important within the choral craft because our art form exists in the importance of citation. Noting who the composer is, noting what your lineage of education is and who you studied with, understanding that this particular practice came from a specific type of program or that is endemic to a particular area, noting that citation in order to form right relationships in ACDA's mission to be more inclusive and diverse. Our citation needs to extend all the way back to the beginnings of Native folk. If we understand that land acknowledgement and the purpose of citation and program notes, we also need to understand that choral music would not exist if Native lives did not thrive before.
Yeah, and I'll add to what Jace is saying. Land acknowledgements, I think, started largely within academia. That's where I started to see and hear the terminology, we are in the lands of land acknowledgement. But from my own personal experience, every time I go to a powwow or every time I visit a reservation in the United States or a reserve or any indigenous land worldwide, this is something that the indigenous people do. We've been doing this forever. And so I think when the land acknowledgement is very popular right now, to me, a land acknowledgement is also going to include a relationship with the people of the land who are there. And I think this is extremely important. I was recently in Tucson at the ACDA, a conference there. I got invited down to the retreat. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, I saw the land acknowledgement listed on the backside of a paper. However, when I went down there, I was able to connect with a couple of individuals, Native individuals who are from there. And on my off time, I was like talking to them. And I think it would be so great, because in every city in the United States, I'm just going to speak on the United States, that a Native person comes from, it is kind of our custom ways. We have a song for that area. Mm-hmm. Song and introduction kind of go hand in hand, from what I experience with many tribal organizations and Native people like that. So I think it's extremely important for the choral world also to see that oftentimes culture is linked in with singing, and it is not separate kind of thing going on. And so that's what I really feel for land acknowledgements. I feel, and to Native people, we do this all the time, constantly, consistently, and then recently with academia, but it is really important. There are members of tribes in every major city who are from that tribe. And I think it would be a good idea to really start reaching out to those individuals, or to make connections, to actually talk and bring in a live person who is from that tribe, instead of just reading off a quick statement and then letting it go. Or at the concerts that they normally have in the area to showcase different choirs, also invite somebody from the neighboring tribe to either open that concert with a song. I think that's going beyond the land acknowledgement. So
can I ask you a follow-up question to that? In wanting to do that kind of work, because that sounds amazing, how do we make sure that we're valuing Indigenous people's time and knowledge? And what can we do as directors to make sure that we're not just asking Indigenous people to do the work for us?
This question, I think, is kind of I'm going to say kind of a loaded question and kind of break it down. As a person myself who does get invites and does get asked to do things, I've been asked to do things for free, to drive so long out of my way. That is not necessarily okay, depending upon the circumstance. So I think when the person is asking, when the organization is asking, is it to tick a box? Or are they literally genuinely really wanting to, hey, we're coming to your area. Here are the people who are in the area. And now we would like to be in a relationship of some kind to be able to support you, to support your tribe. What is the manner, I believe, in what you are asking? Because it can be done. You can ask somebody and you just want to tick off the box, say, somebody will still come. It's not like people are going to be really looking for this. But me personally, I tend to ask a little bit more questions. So like in your area for Tucson, the Tohono O'odham Nation, right? The Yaqui tribes, there's some major casinos, there's some major presence down there. And when I say major, it's political as well. So understand too, when approaching a tribe, they are a political entity with a lot of power. Your state can't tell them what to do, but understand and approach with respect. And really, I would tend to say lead with what your expectations and intent is in the first place, and know that if you call a tribe, you're contacting an actual government. So bring your most professional foot forward. If you talk to somebody who's just a member of a tribe, say someone like myself, I'm also a representative of my nation, but I will also treat it like a professional back and forth. We're the knowledge keepers and things like that. Usually offer an honorarium or some kind of conversation beyond just can you come and perform? Can you come and do this?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Megann, did you have anything you wanted to add to our question?
Yeah, I was thinking back about what Dr. Saplan said about genealogy, and that's usually the first thing that comes to mind when I think of land acknowledgement, just knowing who has come before you so that you may honor them in the music that you sing. I think in our choral craft, it's just building empathy about the people that you're singing for, the people of the music that you're performing. I think it's just knowing who has come before you and knowing the work that they have put in for you to be where you are today and stand on the land that you are on. It just builds empathy for the people and the land and the music that you are representing.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. And we've already sort of touched on this a little bit, but I'll ask you to maybe expand. How do we honor ancestral lands through choral performances? So Michelle touched on this a little bit, but are there other ways that we can do that?
You know, we're uniquely primed in Hawaii because the repertoire that we honor within our communal vocal legacy or our choral legacy, for Native folk, the kinship between our bodies and the land that we stand on is absolutely paramount. That exists at the center of our being, right? And it, you know, to unpack what it looks like through a pedagogical perspective, you know, it's kind of like unraveling a tightly wound fern, because it's a humongous spiral that's interconnected always and always. And so one thing that I always circle back on in how, you know, Western approaches to the choral craft can hold space for more Native practices is this ability to understand that the work that you are singing is uniquely tied to ritual, even if it's devoid from it within a Western context, because that composition is housed within an indigenous framework because it is connected to song, and song is therefore a universally Native ritual. And so I always ask folks, if choirs come and visit Hawaii, or if I'm asked to clinic a choir, I always ask, how does this piece honor your community? How is the work that you are doing, the goodness that you are bringing to tuning that chord, eventually result into the building of communal solution? How does it honor the land that you walk on? Are you able to cite the ancestral homelands of that particular composer? Are you able to cite the ancestral homelands of that poet? Because if you go down that rabbit hole, you begin to see the score in a completely different way. For example, Queen Liliuokalani wrote a piece called Ku'upoi Paukalani, right? Last reigning queen of Hawaii writes a piece about a flower. In other words, knowing her ancestral homelands of one particular part of Oahu, you then realize that her whole family was responsible for the upkeep of the royal garden. You then begin to realize the fact that that royal garden was for her people. And then you realize the metaphor is not about a flower. It's about the honoring of all of the Hawaiian people that are housed within the symbolism of a pua, of a flower. That's what Native practice can do to you, Native inquiry. By when you connect your questions in rehearsal to the reverence of land and the aloha, the love that you have for land, it immediately allows us to dig deep, right? And to find embedded meaning within these musicianship components that we think are innately Western. The chord has meaning. The tuning of the chord has meaning because it cycles back to your service and connection to the ground that you stand on.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I want to add, I just really want to add to the fact, if we break down like a lot of Native American songs, for instance, that I teach in the way that it's oral. It's an oral tradition, A-U-R-A-L. And I can read music, I can write music, but when I sing and when I compose, the only thing I'm going to be writing down, if that, is words. But at a lot of our cultural gatherings, we don't write things down and nobody hands anything out. So is it possible to then teach a song like that to a choir? Yes, it is. And so these songs, whether if we get down to grade levels, or is it SSA, is it SATB, where's the difficulty in the piece? I know some people look for rigor, but we're talking about songs that lasted before I was alive. that are connected to the land. And these songs will live on after I'm gone. These songs are the ceremony. They open up to the area of land of which they were composed. So I do a lot of traveling outside of choral work, just culture to culture. So, you know, going to Alaska, when we were greeted with a song. There's no music present. It's all done back and forth. And then I can say, yes, I'm a Paiute, I'm a Nama here from Nevada, so I'm going to share with you one of my songs. So to each and every area that in the United States that anybody could go, there is a culture, there is a song connected to it that was here before music education, before choral written down, and it'll still be here whether or not those kids, those people are ever in a choral setting. And so I think understanding that rather than, is it written down? Where's the piano part? And then looking at it as less than if there's no notation and if there's no piano part, because you know, that's how our culture survived. Imagine being a walking, living music library, having thousands or hundreds of songs within your head at any given time. You are an educator anywhere, anytime without the piano. And so I think the respect for that, if you know, if I was asked to come and say, hey, here I am to work with this choir, I'm going to teach you a song out of my land. We're here in Nevada. Here's what I would like to teach you. I could teach you that song and do it in my terminology, but I also have a classical music side. Whether or not to use classical music, I think is really, really important. But these songs are tied to our legacies. They are tied to identity of the very land that you're in. And when you change states, when you change just a few hours over, the songs will change, but the meaning behind them does not. And it's not just, was it rigorous enough? You know, was this a high grade level? Was this a low grade level? Where's the rigor? Where's the, you know, that's what I kind of feel we have Western music pushing on a lot of the Native music that I do and when I do trainings as well.
Could I add to that really quickly? Because I think that touches upon a significant point of what rigor means to a Native mind and a Native community. It's the ability to understand that your brain carries a cosmos of song, right? A cosmos of memory. And so the rigor is not necessarily like within that's tied within Western components, although it can be, because contemporary Native composers exist and current day Native composers exist that are using a whole bunch of media platforms. But when it comes to ancestral song, you know, how beautiful and big is your memory built upon? That's rigor to me. Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Michelle.
Megan, did you want to add anything?
No, that was beautiful. I think I'll just, I want to praise Dr. Saplan for the way that they teach Hawaiian music at the University of Hawaii at Manoa is so wonderfully tied to who you are as a person. And even if you are not of the Kanaka Maoli, you still have ways with the questions that they have asked in the beginning. How does this piece honor your community? How does it honor the land that you stand on? I feel like as a singer, it's you feel it so much more, and it's in the way that you get to share it with other people. It's a different feeling knowing the genealogy behind it and knowing the meaning behind everything that you sing is more than just what is on the page or what is being sung to you. They do it so well. There's what we do is Pico is what we do in choir, and it's just taking time to understand the underlying meanings of the song and how it relates to you as a person and how it relates to where you come from and how you connect to it in a way that makes the music more meaningful. So I love this conversation. It's great.
So let's kind of switch directions a little bit. And I'm going to ask you if you can identify or explain what might be some damaging practices that choral directors need to be aware of and how to potentially avoid those.
Megan, you want to go first?
Yeah. I think, excuse me if you hear sounds in the background. When it comes to trying to find the Hawaiian word is kauna, but the hidden meaning, we talked, Dr. Saplan talked about the unraveling fern. I feel like if you don't go through the unraveling and you try to just get to the center of it, and that could just be putting on a costume that you take on and take off, and something of that nature. It could be metaphorical or literal, but I'm thinking like if you have to do the work of unraveling that fern and how it ties to your community and how it ties to you as a person. If you kind of just try to find the center and try to find the hidden meaning immediately without doing the work of connecting with culture bearers of that nature, I think I'm repeating myself, but what I'm trying to say is that if you just try to skip all the work of connecting with your community and trying to find the kauna without doing that work, I think that could be detrimental to not only to the performance, but to the people that you're trying to honor.
I'm gonna go ahead and add, I had to like regroup a minute when I was like, damaging practices, what is this? So part of my work, I get emails from educators in the United States and Canada oftentimes, and the main thing some of them want to know is this culturally appropriate? Is this culturally okay? Are you going to okay this? And there are over 576 federally recognized tribes in the United States. There are much more than that. So when I say, and I always recommend people should get in contact with some Native music in their local area, there's always people, and I know that there's these people because I know them and I travel a lot. I know there's always indigenous people all the time. There's tribal people all the time who do performances. I'm part of that group who does that. However, what I also see is if I say, hey, can I, or let's work with your choir, where's the music? Do you have the sheet music for that? And I'm like, we need to expand our practices, because the majority of cultures, not just indigenous cultures that I've met in the world, we don't necessarily sit with pianos and music. And then there's oftentimes maybe, oh, well, then this is easy music. This music is, it's just, okay, it's not that hard. So just teach it to me. And they don't ask for the context. They don't ask for the content. And I think context is extremely important. And then if it's a children's song, because I did an in-service, I forget how long ago, and I said, okay, here's a song I'm going to share with you. I usually teach this to children. And almost immediately they're like, where is, oh, it's just a children's song. I wonder what it would look like for high school. It's like, no, you teach this to the youth. You're continuing the tradition forever. Like this is a song that you teach for a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old. They keep singing it. They make it their own. Our culture continues. And so a damaging practice, I would say, is just thinking and listening to a song. That's too easy. There's no piano part. Or the worst, I'm going to say right now, maybe not the worst, but adding drums in a Hollywood beat context. Because for Native Americans, the majority of United States citizens, Canada, or the world, a lot of them know the dun 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 dun. That does not go with our song. Or thinking, okay, I have a choral Native American lullaby here. I have this Shoshone love song. I have this whatever song. I'm going to put flute. I'm going to put a shaker. I'm going to put a drum to it. And it's like, if there is a tribal nation attached to any song, there are people living who you could contact and get in contact with that song. It's not every single Native American song, maybe that has been written for choral, needs a rattle of some sort, needs a native flute, or a recorder. It's like, these are, to me, these are damaging practices. And it's almost just like the speed at which educators want to do things, but they're more so acting off of their stereotypical, what Hollywood has put out, rather than take an hour or 2 hours, look up the nation of the song that it comes from on YouTube, because we live on YouTube and Facebook. Native American people that I know, we don't have a network of any kind, but everything is on social media. But you could put in like powwow songs 2022, hand game songs 2021, circle dance songs where I'm from, smoke dance songs. You could put in the tribal name songs 2021 and something is bound to come up, but many educators won't take the time to train your ear. It's like, if you're gonna do a specific style of music, you need to know what that style of music is. How many renditions have you heard? Is your ear trained? Do you know what an excellent version sounds like? A mediocre version sounds like? A bad version sounds like? I think there's this idea that excellence does not exist because it's not written down. And one of my last interactions that I've had, I would say another damaging practice, I always get talked to as if, if you wrote that down, you could really save your culture. This would be great. And it's like, first of all, these songs have been around a lot longer than I have without notation. So another damaging practice is thinking that classical Western music education is going to save the native song that does not have current composition down. So for me, this is my area right now to where classical music, I could be a Native American composer writing in a classical music style, but I'm also a Paiute woman, a Washoe woman, a Shoshone woman. When I'm singing my songs, I'm going to do them the way that I know them in my culture. Am I going to write them down for you? No. Can I? Yes, but that's not the context. It goes down, right? So this was an unexpected thing I ran into in the last few months. Was like, you really think Western music notation is going to save my culture, and you're just going to dismiss it if I can't hand you an SSA or a score or something like that? So I had to regroup, and that's how I think about it. So to me, that's a very damaging practice, thinking that Western notation is going to save the culture that's already been flourishing despite genocide, despite the boarding schools. And all my grandparents, I'm just put this out to you all, I always forget to mention this, all of my grandparents went to a boarding school. That's my grandparents. They spoke their native languages, the Shoshone, the Washoe, and the Paiute, which Shoshone and Paiute are somewhat similar. Washoe and Paiute are not similar at all. There's nothing connecting those. So all my grandparents spoke those. They did not pass any other language down to my mom and my dad. That ended there. And so with my generation, I'm 40 years old. With my generation, when we would try to ask about things, we got told certain things. But anyways, damaging practices, again, thinking that there's these put together resources that somebody has to write it down. Western classical music notation can save your culture if you, and I'm saying it in that manner because that's how I was spoken to, as if like, did you ever think you can save your, I'm like, and now I'm knowing that I'm like, no, it's been this way forever. And just to be able to have that respect for other cultures who have oral traditions, and walking libraries of people who have hundreds and hundreds of, connections in songs to the land. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Jace, did you want to add anything?
Sure. So our choral profession is at a fork in the road in terms of the decision of how we amplify and celebrate our Native community, right? We can look at history and note that choral practices have brought significant harm to Native choral folk, noting that, the choral ensemble was a crucial way to acculturate Native bodies and Native lives away from their ancestral ways towards something incredibly different. And if you think about the power of a homophonic texture or a homophonic hymn as a starting point of how Native lives, who before Western contact, everyone was a composer, everyone was a musician. I always tell my students, imagine Hawaii and every single person that you meet within a 25-yard radius, there's just constant melodic contour around you, right? And then all of a sudden to be told, no, read what's on the page. And your voice part is what you sing. Soprano. So yet another affect of identity in which we have to code switch in and out of as marginalized folk. I see that and I contextualize that to kind of to amplify what Michelle is saying, right? Like repertoire and curriculum does not constitute culturally responsive or sustaining practice. Repertoire and curriculum has to be housed within the ancestry of the pedagogy, right? They have to be interconnected. We cannot teach this repertoire with the expectation that it will be housed within a 4/4 pattern, in which it will be tuned within a specific way. Our pedagogy must meet the repertoire. Our pedagogy must meet this repertoire because it's tied to a story, because it's tied to land, right? And so to understand the labor that's behind these Native lives, so many of us, myself included, we're a part of a culture that is fighting to ensure that their rights, their practices, and their access to their ancestral homelands, their rituals to have access to the waters in which they can fish, and also to make sure that their languages survive, is all housed on our shoulders. So to think that what is also needed as we step forward into Western frameworks or a conference or within a classroom, that does not disconnect us from those responsibilities. We carry our responsibilities wherever we go. It's an extension of us. When I step forward in front of a choir, I'm holding my responsibility as a Native person to share my ancestral songs with the next generation, right? So because of that, we talk about damaging practices. We have to understand that words matter and the positionality of the boundary of your identity matters. If you are coming to this conversation as an ally, the questions that you ask us need to evolve. We are not a walking J.W. Pepper catalog. Our repertoire exists in our bodies. So you must be prepared to meet us and to be part of that ancestral memory. To realize that if we sing a song, maybe taking out your notebook is not the best thing to do, but to receive it, to open your brain to it, to open your body to it, because then you are part of that lineage. Maybe when you ask us to engage with your community, realize that what we're going to say and how we're going to engage upon it is more than curriculum, it's practice. So think damaging practices is also understanding the fact that we may take up as within the population less than 2%, according to the latest census data. But what is it? Because of that, within that 2% of space that we take up, there is a plethora of ancestral memory. There is a plethora of ritual. There's a plethora of traditions. And so if we, as the choral profession, want to speak and amplify and stand in allyship with the nuance, then we have to be prepared to think that having things that are written down diminishes the nuance in which we are trying to embody.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to sort of tie into what Dr. Saplan was just mentioning, and how you mentioned allies and doing this work. So how can non-Native, non-Indigenous people be of service or stand in allyship with Native traditions within the choral art?
I'm gonna go ahead and jump in a little bit. I've been lately, as part of my presentations, I know at least for myself, being a Native American woman who is enrolled with an actually federally recognized tribe, the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe, what that means, I hold a political status, and a lot of our tribal nations that are federally recognized hold a tribal status, meaning that if each and every single tribe, they get to make up who gets to be a member and who does not. There's a 100% guarantee or way of kind of tracking somewhat lineage, because with those documents are there. But we have a section of the government, the United States government, dedicated to all tribes. And I think this is not really understood. It's almost as if, let's do our land acknowledgement. Native American people, we are on these conquered lands. Well, I bring up the political part because there is a movement going on called Land Back. There, every single year in the United States Supreme Court, there are cases being brought up when this country was formed. They go back to the 1800s. And there are cases being won each and every year where land in whatever state is being awarded back to the original people. So therefore, that means that the United States is not 100% colonized. And that means that this land that is being given back, the identities, these songs, some people are getting back in touch with their roots of land that maybe their great-grandmother, grandfather was removed from. In their lifetime, they are now seeing that land being given back. Now, whatever was going on within the state, that'll change kind of the political territory and the makeup of what's going on. And even in the state of California recently, they have returned some of the redwood forest back to some of the tribes. There is no other group of people in the United States that has a section of the government, the Bureau of Indian, BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, formerly known as the Department of War, that oversees these things. The United States Supreme Court is the only court where these land issues can be awarded back to Native tribes, and it is still going on. There are tribes also who have put in to their to like their tribal law and everything, a lot of rules for anthropologists to follow. If you are going to attempt to come to our reservation, you are not allowed to make money or something, blah, blah, blah. That I think is the Navajo Nation. They have gone through, and each and every Native nation has the right to do this. A regular citizen, somebody just studying our cultures at a university, they have no right to sue a tribe because of its federal. So with that being said, when it comes to Native American nations and wanting to include us in something like that, you have to understand that the political level is very high. They don't have to do it. We saw during the COVID era that we had, even on my reservation, we closed access to our lake. When our tribal chairman at the time chose to close access to the lake, that means nobody, not even other Native nations, except for Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe, was allowed there. We had checkpoints around our lake. Now that rattled some feathers. There were people, I'm going to drive through there. This is my American right, and I have every right. No, you don't. So there's still this push and pull thing here. When we're talking about Native American nations, in some Native American nations are buying back land because they've been able to, it's really hard to get enterprises. The closer you are to a city, the more easier it might be. But the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, has to let you enter into business associations. It's not like we could just go and do this. However, we are very protected. So if I really wanted to, and I get on my tribal council, I could go ahead and make some designations that no one is allowed to sing our songs, and we could come after legally, possibly use our powers that way. I know that it's illegal to own eagle feathers. It's illegal for anybody to do that except Native Americans because of the significance it holds towards our culture. So there's a political aspect there that I always bring in, and it's like, you have to remember the United States, the Native nations, there's an attempted genocide on us all. Some tribes were wiped out, but I'm here talking to you today, right? And even all the things that have happened to the first indigenous peoples, we are still here. And we have songs that have spanned and a lifetime, but we also have a lot of political power that is often unseen, invisible. And I think it's probably kept that way so that tribal nations can't see that. So what does that mean? To me, I just always want to put that out there so that everyone knows. And I'm trying to remember what the question was, because I was going to live it to what's the question again?
So how can allies stand in service or allyship with Native traditions?
So to respect the fact that we have tribes living and they have this political status. Oftentimes I feel, well, what's just a Native song that I could just quickly do, as if it has no meaning, as if it's so easy to learn, just with something simple. When it is an entire identity. Is that tribe, and of your choir, your choral area, is that tribe currently fighting for land back or something like that? If you see any protests anywhere of any indigenous people, we lead with song. Songs are always present. So what can allies do? I would say really sit back and do not think, I can't say, well, I mean, like, if you're thinking that we're a complete conquered people, that right there, you're not an ally. You don't know enough.
Right.
And when I'm spoken to by people like this, it's almost as if anything I say, any respect I would like for my songs and culture, it's not going to happen. So understand where we're at today. And I really like that we're all on here as contemporary people in our own communities, because if you talk to each and everyone, we could tell you what we're fighting for, right? My tribe, always water rights. We fought for our water rights against the settlers and the colonizers in our area, and we won. And I'm still in my ancestral area because we fought a war and we won. So they weren't able to kick us out of this area, but we won. And we were content with staying on our lands. And we're not really talking about kicking people out, but land back would mean if your school is residing on a reservation or native land that is in the court system right now, do you know what land currently is up in the United States Supreme Court that may be given back? And if you live there, if your choir's there, if your school's there, respect that and like make contact with the people and learn how you can live together. Because at this point, land back, we are getting rewarded land back and we're still here. But relationship with the political entity that are our native nations, it's not just here's a conquered people. No, these people have some serious political power. And not only that, we're stewards of the land, and we don't see kicking everybody out. That's not a thought process of an indigenous person that I've ever met. We're all here and we want to live together, and we all want equal respect when we're being spoken to. And that's one thing I feel right now when I enter into conversations, even with other BIPOC people who aren't Native or aren't indigenous. I get the feeling they don't understand they're guests in this land, and they also still have to, any ally to a Native person, wherever you reside, it's good practice. And even myself, when I go to different states, if I go to somewhere else, I know that's not my tribe. That's not my, so being wait to be asked and invited to things, or just letting the relationship grow organically, coming in contact. This is not fast. So if you want to become an ally, it's not immediately overnight. Okay, here's your stamp of approval. I don't know if any of you guys have been ever asked like that. Sometimes I feel like I can't give you a stamp of that's not, to me, that's not an ally. So I'll just go ahead and hand it over to some other people, how they feel about the allies.
I would say 3 things in terms of what allyship looks like in regards to our choral community. And that is, one, when you are working with communal vocal music that exists within Native communities, and you are finding transfers to that into your classroom, there's a Hawaiian phrase called ikalo no keola, ikalo no kamake. In language there is life, in language there is death. When you are working with a specific language, so many Native folks are working so hard to preserve their language base and to amplify the reality of their language, and making sure that it exists on as many tongues as possible for the sake of language survival. And that is a humongous responsibility, and that directly connects to tokenism, right? So when you engage with a work that exists within our ancestral memory, your responsibility is to understand that you are part of the life of the language. So make sure that the language lives, right? Understand that you have a responsibility and make sure that your students understand that responsibility as well. The second thing, and this is kind of amplifying what Michelle is saying, is that a Native human being, and when we regard with them in consultation or potentially resource sharing, those relationships exist outside of this Western idea of going to an online resource, purchasing that music and coming back. We call this pilina, right? So I imagine pilina being like two, again, ferns. Note the imagery, friends, land-based imagery. Two ferns that interweave each other and constantly meet in and out of boundary while respecting the boundary, but still meeting. And pilina means that it's a relationship. It's a relationship that takes time. It's a relationship that takes back and forth. It's a relationship in which you are clarifying your intention and opening up your brain and your heart for feedback and for right relationship and for clarification of boundary, always. And that's the purpose of allyship. And the last one is understanding, and I'll always say this, I'll echo this again, is that the repertoire connects to practice. Whether it means pedagogy or ritual, however you want to frame it, to me, there is no difference. The repertoire exists and must be connected to the framing of practice and pedagogy.
Can you give us an example?
Very good. Yeah, so for example, if I am singing a song called OEVA, which I've taught to many choirs over Zoom throughout this time, but it's realizing that the whole purpose around OEVA, the underlying current of that song is talking about beckoning upon Native and Native folk across all shores, is you are beckoning community, right? So if you think about teaching that song as like this flashy song with movement, you're no longer connecting it to the pedagogy, as opposed to realizing that each movement has a purpose, each word means something, and the underlying purpose is you as an individual inviting everyone in.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Megan, did you want to add anything?
Sure. The two words that I think of are respect and receive. So just reiterating what everyone has said, just respecting the land that you're on, respecting the culture bearers that you come in connection with, and just receiving what they give you. We had talked about the difference of literacy and rigor within the Western context and then the Native lens. I think just allowing yourself to be uncomfortable with not having things be within your realm of understanding and just receiving that information and receiving everything as it comes, thinking about the pilina of the fern, just allowing yourself to be uncomfortable with not knowing everything and receiving the information that we as a people would like to share with you. And then knowing that, as Michelle said, it takes time to build stronger bonds with these culture bearers. So knowing that it won't happen overnight and just allowing yourself to receive as it comes.
It's wonderful. Thank you. So we're coming up on the end of this. So I will ask just one more question, but I also want to leave time for you all to share anything additionally that you feel like if you haven't yet said and you want to make sure is said. So I want to leave time for that. But what do you think are the next actionable steps that choral conductors can take to go beyond a land acknowledgement statement? And what resources exist for people who want to do more research and understand this better?
I can go. I'll be quick about this. Start using the land acknowledgement. You know, words have power. And while it may be, and while we're examining how a land acknowledgement contributes to better practice, I think it's also important for us as educators to scaffold, right? So land acknowledgement is a really important thing to say. And when I remember the first time hearing one, and with it here in Hawaii, and I immediately felt seen. And you know, to feel seen in this profession is important for retention and for ensuring that our work continues to go forward. Once you create a land acknowledgement, I always think it's important within the conversation of the people that you serve and teach and facilitate, asking them, how are our values and our practices, do you see them embodied in the acknowledgement, right? Sometimes we put all of this work on our own, but Native practices call upon us to know that you are not alone. You are so interconnected into a community of people and on a lineage of ancestors that want only the best for you. And so understand that this question and this idea is connected to a larger whole. In terms of practices, like you have 3 people here that I'm sure would love to engage with you further and would love to connect you to who needs to be connected to if we cannot serve that conversation. 2 resources that are books that I think have completely transformed my practice into living more into my own skin as a Native person. The first one is From a Native Daughter, Colonialism and Sovereignty in Hawaii. There's so many transfers to make within pedagogy. That book is by Haunani K. Trask. She was my undergraduate mentor. I wear her today. We recently lost her, and so I'm really happy that we're having this conversation. I think she is smiling down upon us. The second is another book that I don't have the cover for because it's currently arriving. I want to shout out to my friend, Dr. Emily M. Ryan from the University of San Diego for this recommendation. And that is Hungry Listening, Resonant Theory for Indigenous Sound Studies by Dylan Robinson. This book really talks about how Native people listen and how Native people hear. I've said a lot about connecting theory to practice, or from repertoire to ritual. And that book is a great case study into how a Native mind engages with their sound worlds.
I guess I'll go next. I think moving forward with choral practices is also to realize that, so if you invite, say, me to one of your conferences, well, I don't know why I do this, but I do. I'm like, where am I going? Like when I went to Tucson, okay, I'm calling this friend, I'm calling that friend. Just our ability to connect with different Natives in different cities, and Native Americans are in every city. More of them live off the reservation than do on. So it's really easy when you find someone who's connected to other singers to actually get the real thing to come in, so you can hear an excellent example. So I'm a powwow dancer, and I do sing, backup sing. I enter hand drum contests internationally in Canada and the United States. And when we take that population of Natives, and it's very small, depending upon where I'm going, I try to contact the singers in the area, whether or not I'm invited them to sing with. I just want to go meet up with them so that we can connect kind of that way. So I think where we could be moving is knowing where you're going and knowing that Native American people exist in cities, and we could get them to come sing for you, which is what I kind of did at the ACDA retreat, right? I had a friend of mine drive down from Phoenix, Arizona, and we were able to sing a powwow song for you. Without him there, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So connecting with the modern day composers, and I always say this with Native Americans because we have so many composers and modern day songwriters that are there for you, trying to reach back and say, is this okay? A song from 60 years ago. Everything is very current. So there's a couple of Facebook pages. The Social Distance Powwow is a great place to go look. There's thousands of videos on there. When I mean thousands, I seriously mean thousands. Virtual round dance. There are thousands of songs on there, hand drum songs from all over, and everybody always says their nation. I'm even in one of the videos when I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and sing one night. So virtual round dance, Social Distance Powwow page. And then I also have a YouTube channel that I started, and I have a couple of new videos. I'm going to be varying my repertoire. It's going to be about the choral world, the band world, the orchestral world. I kind of do a whole thing. So I'll have resources and hopefully links to videos underneath that. There's a lot of powwow videos. So you can find it with my name, Michelle McCauley. And I'm always willing to collaborate and move forward with people and to connect people to other natives who are willing to, choral directors, no matter if you have a doctorate, master's, or bachelor's, you really have to be willing to be a new student again. And that's where I'm always at. I have a master's, I could go get a doctorate if I want to, but I'm choosing not to. But I never consider myself the expert. And I know that's kind of a long shot for some people, but that's really what we have to do. We're the continual learner, and we're never the expert.
Wonderful, thanks. Megan.
Just to add, I think just taking time in your rehearsal to connect with the music in a different way, either by bringing in a culture bearer or by just doing extra work and finding the hidden meanings behind the music that you sing, just taking time out of the rigor that you know of tuning a chord and fixing intonation, finding ways to connect with the music in a deeper level, I think would be very helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I think this has been an incredible conversation. I appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to have this discussion and share your experiences and your knowledge. I want to just end it with asking if any of you or all of you have anything you haven't said yet that you want to make sure is said, or I leave it to you to sort of close it out for us.
I just want to drive home a point that Jace was like talking about, in the fact that a lot of our thought process as Native and Indigenous people, even when I've met, Maori from another continent, or I've met other Indigenous people, there is this feeling, and there's different words for it in different languages, which is we are all connected, right? There's something there with the song where we want to be connected, and we perform all the time these songs to be connected. It's not a performance to be in a theater to be clapped at too, but singing Indigenous songs, Native songs, is a lifetime practice. And I guess you could call it a performance. We sing it, we do it, and it's meant to be performed somewhere. So decolonizing, or these terms that are being thrown around, does not mean no more performing. These are kind of like an endearance of love and a gift to one another. And if I gift a song, or a nation gifts a song to me, because I've been in so many of these, I'm not thinking, ooh, how can I go perform this? I'm just sitting there and receiving. So, it's a way of connecting person to person and building a worldwide community through song, specifically through song and dance. But that's the feeling that I get. It's like we are all connected.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank your work, Alyssa, in moderating this panel. I wanted to thank our panelists for sharing so bravely. And I also want to just share that, on behalf of our ACDA Western region, we are so incredibly excited to move forward with our land acknowledgements during our opening concert on Wednesday evening. And I wanted to just give a formal mahalo, a leo mahalo, a voice of thanks to the Tongva San Gabrielino people and their consultation and their work and their hearts in ensuring that we can be very thoughtful and move forward with their ancestral wishes as we cultivate this land acknowledgement and as we move forward with the conference. I wanted to also thank Alexis Duro, who has been an incredible liaison. And I would just like to offer mahalo to ACDA for valuing this work, to President Lou Della Rosa for ensuring that this exists at the heart of our work. And I so look forward to seeing all of you watching this video at our ACDA Western Region Conference in Long Beach. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Aloha.